Hey guys, let's get more news about Dallas, but first, don't forget to subscribe and leave your like. Cowboys could lose pass rusher to Commanders after Dan Quinn hire. The Dallas Cowboys will be seeing Dan Quinn twice a year for the foreseeable future, but there could be other free agents joining him too. There are several Cowboys players set to test free agency, but one name stands out among the rest. Dante Fowler Jr. The defensive end has considerable history with Quinn, as Blogging the Boys' Brian Martin pointed out. It only makes sense for the pass rusher to consider a move to the Washington Commanders. From college to the pros, Dante Fowler has a long history with Quinn and could follow him to Washington like he did in Dallas, Martin wrote on February 6. Like Dorrance Armstrong, he's been a key rotational piece for the Cowboys the last two seasons, registering 4.0 and 6.0 QB sacks in that two-year span. He'd add much-needed depth for the Commanders and would come relatively cheap considering the contracts he signed recently. Martin mentions Armstrong as a potential departure as well. But between the two DEs, Armstrong has been a more versatile and consistent producer. If the Cowboys had to keep one, Armstrong makes more sense as a player who was drafted by the organization and has been a solid piece over the past 6 years. Dante Fowler Jr.'s time in Dallas. Arriving in the NFL as the third overall pick in the 2016 NFL Draft, Fowler has been around the block. It's safe to say that he's never hit star billing in the NFL. But he has been a useful pass rushing tool for several teams, including the Cowboys and Atlanta Falcons. Entering the 2020 season, Fowler was looking for a team. Quinn, who coached Fowler at Florida, was then the head coach of the Falcons and signed him up. And when Quinn was fired ahead of the 2021 offseason and subsequently hired by Dallas, Fowler followed him again in 2022. Over 2 years in Dallas, Fowler totaled 10 sacks and 3 forced fumbles. He never made a start, but he also never missed a game in 2022 or 2023. For a rotational player, that's an ideal situation. The Cowboys may consider keeping Fowler, but his connection to Quinn means nothing is a guarantee. Cowboys could bring back Mike Zimer. As Quinn gets set up in Washington, the Cowboys are still looking for their next DC. One of the confirmed names to interview is Mike Zimer, the former Minnesota Vikings head coach who was also a longtime DC in Dallas. NFL media insider Tom Pelissero was the first to report the news on February 6. The Cowboys are interviewing former Vikings coach Mike Zimer today for their defensive coordinator job, per source. Pelissero wrote on X. Zimer has had plenty of NFL success since his initial stint in Dallas. Although his Vikings team fell short of a Super Bowl appearance, he took Minnesota to 3 playoff appearances. His tenure as the Cowboys' defensive coordinator lasted from 1999 to 2006. Hiring Zimer would make sense, as he's got a deep familiarity with owner Jerry Jones and the organization. However, he is a whole 2 years removed from the NFL. He spent 2022 with Deion Sanders and Jackson State, and was not employed in coaching during the 2023 season. Jerry Jones not concerned Mike McCarthy's contract will restrict his search for defensive coordinator. Jerry says McCarthy's contract situation irrelevant to new defensive coordinator hire. The search is on for the Dallas Cowboys and a new defensive coordinator. After Dan Quinn left for the Washington Commanders last week, the vacant position at Dallas has been a hot topic. There is one hurdle when it comes to the new hire, Mike McCarthy's contract. McCarthy is now in the final year of his contract with no discussion at present of his tenure being extended. That means whoever Dallas decides to hire this season for defensive coordinator would effectively be on a 1-year contract. Jerry Jones was asked this very question and whether this would restrict the search, but he made comments to the Dallas Cowboys media team last week that would suggest that's not a concern to him. I don't anticipate that being an issue at all. If they take the job, they will be coordinator of the Cowboys. They would be looking at that right there and all that goes with that. If they're aspiring, they know there's a chance to be a head coach someplace, because the one that just left is. When asked when fans should expect to hear the name of their new defensive coordinator, he simply told reporters, "We're basically planning meetings. I won't get into who we're interviewing, but we have interviews beginning at 9 in the morning, meaning Monday." He was also asked about the potential of facing two former coordinators within the division, now that Quinn is at Washington and Kellen Moore was hired as the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. Well, they know us pretty well, don't they? In his back pocket, Jones has a reason he may feel nonchalant about the one-year problem facing any new defensive coordinator signing with Dallas, and that's the talent. Jerry knows the Cowboys' defense will be enticing for any coach that has aspirations to progress in the league. But the flip side of that is that Ron Rivera and Mike Zimmer are probably no longer aspiring to be a head coach, they are more interested in just continuing a coaching career. The time for them leading a team is probably over. Aiden Durd, the Cowboys' defensive line coach, may fit that mold of an aspiring coach, but the Cowboys aren't exactly spreading their net wide for aspiring future head coaches unless there are some mystery candidates we are unaware of. All of this may be irrelevant soon as the Cowboys could be announcing a new hire very shortly unless they decide to add some more interviews. Cowboys could hire Super Bowl champion to replace Dan Quinn, report. The Dallas Cowboys look towards a familiar name to replace Dan Quinn as defensive coordinator. The Cowboys are due to interview former Minnesota Vikings head coach and a former assistant coach of theirs in Mike Zimmer, according to NFL Network's Tom Pelissero. The Cowboys are interviewing former Vikings coach Mike Zimmer today for their defensive coordinator job, per source, writes Pelissero on Tuesday, February 6. Mike Zimmer previously coached Cowboys defense for 7 seasons. The 67-year-old is best known for his recent long head coaching tenure with the Vikings, spending 8 seasons as the lead man on the sidelines between 2014 and 2021. During his 8 seasons in Minnesota, Zimmer led the Vikings to the playoffs 3 times, including an NFC Championship game appearance during the 2017 season. The Vikings never finished with less than 7 wins in a single season during Zimmer's tenure in Minnesota, and he compiled a 72-56-1 record, .562, during his time with the Vikings. Minnesota compiled the 10th best record in the league between 2014 and 2021. Outside of his recent stint with the Vikings, Zimmer also spent the 2022 season as an analyst/consultant for Deion Sanders' former college football team, Jackson State. The connection is notable because Sanders won a Super Bowl with the Cowboys at the conclusion of the 1995 season, while Zimmer was the defensive backs coach. Zimmer's tenure with the Cowboys as an assistant was also a long one. He coached for 13 years from 1994 until 2006. Serving as the defensive coordinator for his final 7 seasons. The Cowboys are seeking to replace Quinn, who had served as defensive coordinator since the 2021 season and recently accepted the Washington Commanders' head coaching job. Dallas ranked in the top 7 in points allowed in each of the past 3 seasons, including leading the league in turnovers forced during the 2021 and 2022 seasons. Dallas is also due to interview former Commanders head coach Ron Rivera, as noted by Michael David Smith of NBC Sports. Dan Quinn replaced Ron Rivera as head coach of the Commanders, wrote David Smith on Monday, February 5. Rivera may replace Quinn as defensive coordinator of the Cowboys. Rivera is one of 3 candidates who will interview for Cowboys defensive coordinator in the next 2 days. Jerry Jones, not concerned about Cowboys' new defensive coordinator. Team owner Jerry Jones isn't concerned as the Cowboys seek a new defensive coordinator. While addressing Quinn's departure to their NFC East rivals, Jones dismissed the idea of hiring a new defensive coordinator as being an issue. "I don't anticipate that being an issue at all," Jones said on Sunday, via the team website. "If they take the job, they will be coordinator of the Cowboys. They would be looking at that right there and all that goes with that. If they're aspiring, they know there's a chance to be a head coach someplace, because the one that just left is." While the idea of hiring a new defensive coordinator this late in the hiring cycle can be considered a daunting one, it's worth noting that Dallas has one of the most star-studded defensive lineups in the league. The Cowboys feature Pro Bowlers such as Micah Parsons, Darren Bland, and Trayvon Diggs. It also helps that Dallas is targeting proven coaches as defensive coordinators such as Zimmer and Rivera. And you, fan, what do you think about Mike Zimmer playing for Dallas? Leave your opinion in the comments.